My story begins and ends in a single place. Not just an actual place, but a state of mind. A way of seeing how the most commonplace scenes can contain rich histories waiting to be discovered just under the surface. My childhood home was a place settled by German immigrants a century and a half ago. My forebears were among those seeking a new life in America. What I know of my family's history is this. In the 1850s, a man named Konrad Rumpf immigrated here with his wife and young daughter Julia, the first of 13 children. Rumpf worked hard and saved his money. Being a shrewd businessman with a strong back made him successful in America. 10 years later, another Konrad from Germany arrived. Konrad Mueller got a job working for Rumpf in his grocery store in downtown Louisville. Julia, who was half Mueller's age at the time, taught him English, and they fell in love. Sensing trouble, Rumpf dismissed Mueller, who then started his own store and later went off to fight for the North in the Civil War. After the war, Mueller sent word to Julia. They eloped. Rumpf was furious and never spoke to his daughter again. A pity, really. Rumpf was, by then, a man of considerable wealth. But apparently, grudges can run deep in my family. Cut off from Julia's family, the exiled couple settled here in Germantown, a brand new neighborhood comprised of second-generation German, working-class Catholic families. The generations that followed took up honorable trades. The men in my family were craftsmen, wood carvers, plumbers, master builders. They sang in the Liederkranz Society, drank beer, and passed on their trades to their own children. They never moved far from their parents. Their calling, their Beruf, always seemed clear. My own was not. I never picked up the family trades. My father liked to say that I was more interested in thinking than doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do, or who I wanted to be. Lost, unhappy, and always in trouble, I left my family while I was still in high school. You can imagine how well that went over, especially with my father. I made a new home somewhere far away. I always told myself I would go back and sort everything out, eventually. But that never happened. When I did return, it was too late. When I heard from a cousin that my father had died, I hadn't spoken to him in years. I drove cross-country, but somehow I missed the funeral. When I got there, the family was still in mourning. Not many of them even recognized me. It had been 15 years since I left Germantown, but the sense of loss was profound. I looked around and I saw a neighborhood I knew little about. For the first time, I saw a work ethic that deserved respect, and I was captivated by the quiet pride and dignity of the people who made Germantown their home. That was when I started taking pictures. I had a camera, and for the first time in my life, I felt my calling. I wanted to tell my story and the stories of the people who lived there. I was desperate to connect with the community and the family I'd lost. I've never been very good with words, so I used images. I felt compelled to fabricate a life I never had, the life I might have had if I had stayed. That's how the Germantown body of work came to be. Everything I did after Germantown, the other filmmaking, the other photography, it all started here. Germantown is where I became a filmmaker, and for that, I'm grateful. But I never stayed long enough to consider Germantown home again. Even after making the films, I've remained an outsider, always looking in, observing, and revising. Germantown hasn't changed much on the surface. The buildings probably look a lot like they did 100 years ago. But the families are different now, more assimilated. They choose their callings freely. Germantown is full of artists, musicians, teachers, and nobody gets upset when you come or go. Nobody feels betrayed when their sons and daughters leave the neighborhood in search of a different life. I wonder what my parents would think. I hope they'd be proud. I'd want them to see the images of Germantown and see it as I do. With all its variety, its color, its hardworking immigrant roots still digging deep into the Kentucky soil. Whenever I feel lost and abandoned, whenever I've forgotten how to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, I return to this place. And when I do, I bring my camera to create new memories of where I'm from.
there's a lot of people who don't know what Dainty is, and it's a game that came about because Mom wore out her mop or wore out her broom. And when I say wore it out, she got rid of that broom when it was about that much bristle on it, and she got rid of the mop. When is that? You're literally mopping or sweeping with the handle, because in those days, Mom didn't have too much, so she made that broom and mop last as long as she could. So Dainty is the Dainty stick would be 36 inches long with a point on one end, and the Dainty is say 5 inches with a point on each end. And you lay the Dainty on the ground and you hit the point, and you're hoping that it jumps up in the air, and when it jumps up in the air, you draw back and you hope that you hit it. And today, when one of the rules of the contest, you have to be 45. And when you're 45 or older, and only tried to do this once a year, believe me, it's a lot harder than when you were a kid and played maybe 6 hours a day because you didn't have any money to go anywhere else, and so you played in the street all day long. And Mom was glad you were playing in the street because she knew where you were. But anyway, it's been lots of fun. So Dainty is a game that's comes from either Mom's old broom handle or Mom's old mop handle. It become what it is today, I guess, by an accident. We played that in the street many years ago, when you could really play in the street. Nowadays, if you have a kid and want to get rid of them, you tell them to go out in the street and you hope they get hit by a car or something. But when we were kids, it was really safe. Yeah. You played Dainty, Sheeny, you played Red Rover, you played any kind of game, and you could play it in the street. We played handball off of the side of the store. We'd have Dainty on Hertz, and maybe you'd stop every 15 minutes to let a car come through, but if you try to play Dainty on Hertz today, I'm sure you wouldn't last long. But anyway, it started by accident. Some years back, there was a neighborhood paper. I can't think of the name of it, but I used to put a little ad in there all the time. I think it cost $5 to put an ad in, and it would run it for 2 weeks. And I had kind of a screwball. They were kind of funny ads that would attract your attention. Mm-hmm. And I think the ad was the security man is gone today. We're going to play Dainty, words to that effect. Anyway, and then all of a sudden, I guess I said, well, let's do play Dainty. And I said, as I remember now, I'm going back 32, 33 years. I said, I'll give a $25 bond for the first prize and a carton of cigarettes for the second prize. But anyway, it has grown to something now that I see people that I don't even know that the first question they'll say, they'll bring up Dainty. But the story that I like to tell is I'll go to the funeral home, and you try to be real pious, and you're standing at the casket and you try to show your respects, and you're telling the person that you're so sorry, and all of a sudden he'll kind of sneak up to me and whisper, he'll say, when's the Dainty contest? Oh, he came down on his knees. Been around these Catholics too many years. Dainty contest is always the last Monday in July. It's created lots of fun, and I'm sure it's helped the community. It's helped Snitzelberg, and what's in the paper today when you pick it up? It's robbery, murders, wars, and when you pick up the paper after the Dainty contest, it's usually, if they put anything in the paper or on TV, you'll see a bunch of happy people, and I've got a bunch of old photographs, and I have never seen anybody with nothing but a big smile and happiness on their face. So if you can go through life and do that, I guess you could do worse.
Das ist der Lichtensteiner Poker, mein Schatz. Poker, mein Schatz. Poker, mein Schatz. Oh ja, bei Poker Lichtensteiner auf deinem Platz, mein Schatz. Wenn beim Schieben die Kinder sind, lieben Brüder, ist nicht schön. Oh ja, meine Lichtensteiner Poker, die hat mein Schatz.
I came over here from Germany in '79, and after 3 years somebody said, you know, that's a German club in Louisville, you know, then I became a member here, and I think in '82. I became president, I think the last 8 years ago. It's 95, I was president for 6 years. Part of the German club is, I think it's our goal for Germans here to bring the German heritage, keep the German heritage alive here, and make the groundwork for our grandkids. and also for the rest of Americans, maybe 80% have German blood in them. And it's part feeling home if you do this.
A king in Bavaria got married, and he decided to invite his soldiers, cavalry people, to come and have a race at his wedding. And then a lot of the peasants came, and they had such a good time that the king said we would do this every year. And nowadays, because of weather, they have the Oktoberfest in Germany, in Munich, starting in September, always the third Saturday in September, and it runs till the first weekend of October. And it's basically because of the weather. Years ago, it was only in October. So it's a tradition has been going on for more than 160, 70 years. And it's the world's largest festival. You ought to go sometime.
Well, I think it's just end of the harvest season and a good time. Celebrate you had a good crop and all that. Or if not, you just had a good time anyway.
The Oktoberfest, I was over there back in '98, and it actually goes for like 15 days. It's like 2 weeks with 3 weekends involved. Kind of like the end of September, beginning of October. And believe me, it was a fun time over there in Munich.
Hey, how about a beer? There you go, Bill. No beer here.
We're actually from Evansville, Indiana. We have a whole busload over here. Evansville and Louisville, we have a good rapport with each other. So we're always coming back and forth to each other's events.
Schöne Gruß vom Schwabenverein Chicago und Prost Bayerisch Schwaben. Dankeschön.
Potatoes, all the German food. Sauerkraut.
I'm German, I'm an import. But I live here for 40 years now. Yeah. I'm a Louisvillian, German, American, you name it. I'm international. One of my wife's sisters married a GI, World War II pride, and he was from Louisville. That's the connection. Yeah. The largest German community in this country is supposed to be in Braunfels, Texas, 100 miles north of San Antonio. I want to go there someday. And they gave the consumption of bratwurst by the tons, and the beer consumption by the hundreds of barrels, 10 days. I read it in a travel brochure. worry about our wives and husbands seeing it or anything. She's my German teacher, and she taught me to dance, too. Thank you.
It's the second one we catch today who jumps into the German-American Club. Yeah, Anthony Getzinger. She's right there. I'd be happy to be over here and enjoy the camaraderie with all the people around us. Every day, every minute, you find new friendship. It's something you cannot buy. That's only something you can find.
You remember, it's all your friends here, okay? Hope we see you again.
Dem Wasser die Fragen, so wunderschön in der Heimat, da gibt's ein Wiedersehen die ganze Nacht. In der Heimat, da liegt die ganze Nacht. Okay, danke schön.
Okay, we're almost ready. Wind up the camera. Get it lined up with our group here. So we need everyone to smile. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Camera's on. Hold still, hold still. Give us those smiles, especially you, Reverend Canoe. Ah, this is wonderful. This is going to make a very beautiful, long panorama of everyone here. We're almost done. Don't move. Hold still. We're almost there. Perfect.
One of the things I like about Germantown is the form of the houses, the shotguns and the camelback shotguns. I see a kind of a roughness and vitality in this early 20th century architecture. People don't appear in the paintings, but I can feel a vibrancy of the people who live and who participate in the life of the neighborhood. To me, there is something about that when I go out to work. There is an aloneness, not necessarily a solitude, as I am there working with the changing light in my oil pastels. When I lived in Germantown, I didn't drive, so everything I saw was on an eye-to-eye level from the sidewalks and the streets. I work instinctively, sort of like a fisherman does. You don't know if you're going to get something or not once you go out to work. You work yourself into kind of a frenzy because you're working so quickly against the time and the changing light that you lose yourself. You give yourself over to the experience and become a medium for the muse, trying not to be too conscious of what you're doing. In fact, you're working so quickly that you break out of an analytical way of thinking, and instead you're more responsive to just what you're seeing, but to what you're feeling. You have to believe in yourself in terms of following your instincts, even if you have no idea where in the hell you're going. You can't presume to try to know it or to understand what you're doing, because that'll screw you up more than anything. For me, it's a way to express myself, to express my own feelings and experiences. A camera doesn't say what I want to say. A camera is not going to feel how I do about what I see and experience. I see my paintings as a celebration, yet at the same time conveying a weird sadness.
There's a fish I caught. Big one, he was a big one. Way back in the hill was a boy I once wondered, very deep in the grave, like the girl that I loved. She was called from this earth as a jewel for heaven, more precious than diamonds, more precious than gold. This world has its trials, its winners and its troubles. Mother Earth holds a treasure of diamonds and gold, but they can't hold that soul of one precious jewel. She's resting in peace in that heavenly home. I sung that to my wife 2 weeks before she died. Lord, Lord. 5 years ago. All around the water tank, waiting for the train, 1,000 miles away from home, asleep in the rain. I walked up to a brakeman to give him a line of talk. Said, if you got money, I'll see that you don't walk. I haven't got a nickel, not a penny can I show. Get off, you railroad bum. He slammed that box car door. He put me off in Texas, state I dearly love. The white oak place is all about me, with the moon and stars from above. Nobody seems to want me, to lend me a helping hand. I'm on my way from Frisco, I'm going back to Dixieland. Although my pocketbook is empty, heart all full of pain. 1,000 miles away from home, just waiting for the train. Oh, the lady, oh, lady, oh, lady.
Well, my name is Konnie Mueller. I'm the writer, director, and co-editor of Germantown, which was my very first film. And Germantown tells the story of a man named Henry Knopf, whose life parallels mine in several important ways. He was born and raised in Germantown, but he took it for granted, didn't think it was anything special, and then moved away as a very young adult and did not return for many years. And finally, when he did come back in the aftermath of the death of a family member, he realized how special it was and gained a whole new appreciation for it.
It's been a while, but I was playing Henry Knopf in this movie that was very interesting, I thought. I love the script. And Henry's basically on the West Coast, and after leaving Louisville and being away for many years, he ends up, well, his grandfather had passed away. He felt guilty, so he went back to Louisville, and he finds his grandfather had left him his house, which was amazing. Did not expect that at all.
You know, I actually had no intention of writing it. I saw myself as a photographer, not a writer. Now, I thought I had a story that could be made into a good film, but I didn't think I was capable of writing it. So I hired a couple of top-flight screenwriters, sat down for several days with both of them. They interviewed me at length. And when I read their screenplays, they were professionally done, but I felt like they didn't get the story. They just didn't understand the essence of what I was trying to say. And I was telling a friend that one night, and he said, well, you know, Konnie, you ought to do it yourself. And I was like, no, I'm not a writer. And he said, well, you know, give it a try, you know.
I was doing some comedy at the local comedy club, and I think I met Konnie through that, from what I can remember. And he was we were immediately drawn to each other because we both were independent-minded and thinking and such. And we were talking about screenplays, which I had been writing a few myself, and he was working on this one and several others, and he was trying to find writers. He was, you know, that frustrating period we all go through in our creative quest to find people that, you know, could do maybe a better job than we can. I just told him one day, Konnie, I think you could write this yourself. You know, you have plenty of experience, and you know the story. You grew up here, and it involves all that. You got a great start. Have you thought of writing it yourself?
So I just got home that night, and it was almost midnight, but I sat down, thought I'd try to type a couple of pages, and then before I know it, it's 6 o'clock the next morning, and I've got 40 or 50 pages, and you know, I showed it to my friend the next day, and he said it was good, and I was like, okay, if you say so, you know. So I just kept working on it a little at a time.
A couple of days later, he said, I've started. And it feels really good. Thanks for bothering me about that, you might say.
Because I'd never worked in film before, it was a long process of trial and error. So what I did at first, it was like the proverbial toe in the water. You know, I would get a group of actors and we'd go out and we'd shoot one scene. And it was a challenge because I was trying to get the actors to act out these scenes without the benefit of having read the entire screenplay and having complete context of the scene they were shooting. But, you know, a lot of good came out of it. You know, it helped me polish a lot of my rough edges before I completely immersed myself in the entire project. And I think had I not done those test scenes in the beginning, the final product would have been nowhere near as good.
Not being cast in many things at that point in my life, I did feel like, well, I'm taking somebody's place here. For what reason? Did they not get along with the director? Did they not like the story? And then I started doing some research on Konnie, and a lot of people in town had worked with him at one point, and they didn't like working with him, you know. And I thought, well, okay, well, what's going to happen with us? So, yeah, I felt lucky at one way, and because I liked the story. Another side of me I knew I was working with a very unique but difficult man that was trying to work out something in his life besides just making a movie, possibly. And I could not put my finger on it until the very end.
Conventional wisdom says, you know, for your first film, you want to get a lead actor who's really experienced and, you know, better yet, someone who has a big reputation in the industry, but Since this was such an unconventional project and so personal to me, and because I felt that so few actors from Hollywood would understand the area of Germantown, I decided to go out of the box and try a non-actor.
I had a little bit of acting background with just classes and different things, and so, you know, emotional memory and such, it was something I was familiar with. So the challenge for me was to be able to light that up with the moments I was going through in the character into some emotional form that the audience would be interested in, rather than just some guy running, you know, going through the movements.
Certainly it is a risk when you hire non-actors, but it can work if you bring in people who get the story and are able to relate to the character and get to play themselves, at least to some extent.
Konnie had this insight to Nicholas Roeg, I believe his name is, a director and producer that was using performers like Mick Jagger and David Bowie and, you know, well-known people that were musicians, for example, but people that were used to being in front of a crowd on stage and such, and could really put out the emotion through their act. And he felt that connection, and he wanted to get that connection, the same type of thing in his movie. And he felt that people that performed, basically, music or otherwise, could also transcend that, you know, into an acting role. So he came out, right, basically tapped into me that way. He saw me doing some improv comedy and different things and thought that I had that same thing without bragging. I'm trying to stop myself from bragging here, excuse me, but he thought I had it. So anyway, it worked. We had that was our connection. It was very positive.
Once Nicky came on board, I told him, and he agreed with me, that he should be involved in the casting process for Alice, the female lead, you know, since they were going to be lovers. I thought that it needed to be someone with whom he had good chemistry. So he actually agreed to be with me there in the rehearsal room when we had all the auditions, and he read lines with each of the actresses who auditioned for that role, and we videotaped it, and you know, we spent many hours just going over the auditions. We did about 50 auditions and just studied the chemistry, studied the way that they played off each other, and made the decision together.
One of the interesting concepts of the story, I thought, and was way ahead of its time, was how the character missed his girlfriend, Cassie, and he would send pictures, he would send photographs, and he wouldn't even put any writing or any detailed information about what they were about exactly. Maybe, you know, the people he had met, maybe the bars he had been in. I mean, a number of different things, you know, he would just send them. She wouldn't respond. He didn't know what to do. It was very real that way, I think. That sometimes we just don't know how to connect. You know, there's been a divide, there's been a difference of opinion, a difference of so many levels that we can't connect on, and that's all there is to it. You're not connecting.
You know, actually, it's very awkward for me to talk about this because the character of Cassie, who is Henry's other lover, is actually based on a real-life girlfriend I had the last 3 years I lived in California, named Cassie. And you know, when I first came back here, I didn't plan to stay at first. And once I realized I was going to stay, unfortunately, I was not forthright about it with her, and it dragged on for months, and there ended up being a lot of hurt feelings, and to this day, that's one of the biggest regrets I've ever had, and I hope that someday she and I will be able to completely find healing to those wounds. But at that time, I really didn't feel like I was a writer at all, not even writing letters, which dates the relationship. It was before we had texting and stuff like that. So what I would do, since I always felt that I best expressed myself through pictures, you know, at least once a day, sometimes several times a day, I would make postcards out of the pictures that I took and send them to her. And that was the way I communicated with her. And for a long time, it really resonated strongly with her until she started feeling that the relationship was slipping away.
Konnie was very supportive. I just want to say that, you know, there was times when we didn't agree on a lot of things, or some things I should say, and you know, I would give him what I wanted, and then I would do what he wanted. You know, we'd go back and forth so he could take a look at it and make the choice on post when he was editing. So I think that worked out fine. You know.
There's a danger in hiring somebody who's bigger than you are. I mean, on the plus side, obviously, it brings more attention to your film than it would otherwise get, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, sometimes the person thinks that he's better than you. And, you know, through the pre-production process, you know, Nikki and I got along great, you know, and even when we were going through selecting the auditions, we had no major disagreements. And in the end, we had the same final choice for casting the role of Alice. But once the filming started, he was not at all shy about telling me that he thought I was doing something that was amateur. And I think that he felt, this guy's never made a film before, he's a rookie, I'm better than he is. We finally made a compromise after a few arguments. You know, we agreed that he would do each scene both my way and his way, and let me decide in editing which one I was going to use. So I thought, you know, that's a fair compromise.
We had our differences, you know. We had our differences, Konnie and I. I don't know when I shot. I worked on any project or had any boss that I didn't have some kind of conflict or difference of opinion. I'm opinionated. I'm going to say it. It's just the way I am.
There was one time when it really got pretty tense, and it was the scene where, you know, Nikki's going through a lot of stress and frustration, so he comes out in the middle of the night, shoots baskets. And I took a page out of some of the great Hollywood directors, which I decided to play a mind game to try to provoke a stronger emotion out of Nikki. I actually took down the basketball goals, which here in Kentucky I know is blasphemous, but I went ahead and did it anyway. And I thought, you know, if he has nothing to shoot at, if he's just throwing the ball up in the air aimlessly, he's going to get even more frustrated. But, you know, I think he also had a lot of personal stuff going on in his life at the time that he wasn't talking about. I picked up on later. I heard a few things from friends of his. But anyway, to make a long story short, he got really, really tense and agitated, and it was the closest that he and I ever came to blowing up at each other.
So I'm playing basketball in this scene, and Konnie takes the goals down. I was just going, there's no goal. There's no goal. There's no goal.
In the end, I think my strategy worked because I thought I got a great performance out of him, and after all these years, that's still one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
I'm getting ready to head back to California, and we have one more scene at the graveyard, and Konnie shoots it, just one take, and then like wraps everything up and just like almost like basically runs off. It's like, what's going on? So then next thing I hear is that he's been wrapped up, he's in a room, he doesn't come out for months, and he's in there doing editing and post and such. Disappeared.
You know, I remember very vividly when I said cut and I knew that was the last take of the film, and I dashed off set without saying goodbye to anybody. And never in my wildest dreams did I think people would still be asking me about it after all these years. And you know, when I came out of hiding after the editing was done and the film was released and I started getting interviews, at first I had this real defiant attitude. It's like, I don't know anybody, an explanation, you know? But I think at this point, I think time has healed the wounds where I'm a little more willing to open up about it now. And you got to understand, I was just coming off such a roller coaster of emotions, you know? On one hand, I had just finished filming my first movie, so there was that sense of triumph, but at the same time, that movie was really hard on me emotionally because it opened so many wounds that I didn't realize had not completely healed. I mean, you know, it really opened the wound of the guilt I had over not being there for my father's death and even missing the funeral, you know, arriving there feeling like such a jerk. And I had never dealt with that before, and I'd never completely dealt with, you know, the way that I left Cassie hanging for all those months and really hurt her more than I came to realize for many years.
Wow. Well, the script was what I liked so much about the script was Henry, my character solving all the problems that he had and achieving more insights. So his growth and his relationships and everything in his life was getting better. Konnie was didn't have that, but I think he was hoping for it.
On top of that, I was just burned out because I had so many sleepless nights. I mean, it was because it was my first film. We made a lot of mistakes. We were banking on 75 days of production. It ended up being about 180. So I needed to get away from it all. And back when I was living in Los Angeles, whenever things were going bad, there was this little town about 3 hours east of LA, there in the California desert, that I would just go knowing that nobody was going to know where I was. And so I got a cheap motel room there and just edited the whole thing in my room. And basically I didn't shave for all that time and didn't speak to anybody until the editing got done. And then, by the end of that time, I felt like I was ready to go back to living my life and start to really face my demons for the first time.
I think it hurt him. I think it hurt a part of him that he did not achieve the freedom and release of the pain that he was, maybe that's the only way I can express that he was experiencing in his life by making this movie. That's why I believe he really disappeared, because he did not achieve that. Sad, but true maybe. My name is Henry Knopf, and I just drove 2,000 miles to miss my grandfather's funeral. I could have made it on time. I could have flown. After everything blew up with Cassie, a road trip seemed like the right thing to do. The plan was simple. Drive my friend's car to Kentucky, find myself on the road, pay my respects, fly back in 4 days, and patch things up at home. I know, I can hear you now. You're really gonna find yourself on the road? At least that's what Cassie would say. What's next, she'd say? Crystal healing? Conversations with her aren't going so well. I'll send pictures. You forget how places change over time. Familiar landmarks? Gone. My favorite restaurant? Toast. probably best that I missed the funeral. It's not like my family was going to roll out the red carpet. Dad never really got over me moving away. Or rather, he never got over the way I left. It was my cousin who told me about Granddad. At least she's speaking to me. She's even letting me crash at her place. She'll probably regret it. The old neighborhood. I can't believe Ellen never moved. Now this is a place that doesn't change. It's like time travel. All the old memories, all the old hurt. This place is full of German names. You don't have to look far to find us. Mueller, Rompf, Schuler, Knopf. A lot of Granddad's friends are buried here. It must be good to know where you belong. Me, I never really felt it. That connection. Maybe that's why I left. My best memories from here are with him. We should have spent more time together. It was my fault. Of course, Ellen wasn't home when I got there. Locked out, nowhere to go, nothing to do, can't get a hold of her. Christ. Don't people have cell phones in Kentucky? Probably the best times I had at St. Elizabeth were on the basketball court. It was the only place the nuns couldn't tell you to be quiet. I may have been a real screw-up everywhere else, but basketball was one thing I couldn't mess up. I was kind of a local legend. The next day, Ellen and I got reacquainted with each other and with our old friend Jim Beam. Ellen was the other black sheep in the family, so we always got along. Ellen was hanging out with this guy. She said he painted houses. I thought he was going to paint her living room. Turns out he painted pictures of houses. People in our family took more kindly to builders, craftsmen, plumbers. People who did real work.
Happy Halloween!
But he was okay with me. I can never do any of that stuff anyway.
When we were little, Granddaddy used to take Henry and me out in the country to go stargazing. And when it was cloudy, he'd take us to the planetarium.
There's going to be a comet in a couple of months. You should be able to see it between the Ursa Minor and Cassiopeia.
Well, I can find the Little Dipper, but I never heard of Cassiopeia.
Did I mention the Jim Beam?
Before compasses were invented, sailors used to navigate by constellations like Cassiopeia. They were close to the North Star, and the North Star never sets.
Show me where it is.
Well, first we've got to find the Big Dipper, okay? Over there. See it?
Mm-hmm.
And then any of those stars on the handle, follow up towards the North Star. Same direction, keep on going, and then you'll see a distinctive W or an M, depending on which season of the year it is.
I see it.
Her.
Excuse me?
I said her. She was a queen.
An Ethiopian queen. Cassiopeia was the wife of Cepheus, king of Ethiopia. One day, Cassiopeia offended the sea nymphs, boasting how beautiful she was. To punish her, Poseidon, god of the sea, sent a sea monster to attack the coast of Ethiopia. He also ordered that her daughter, Princess Andromeda, should be given to the monster as a sacrifice. Andromeda was chained to a rock on the shore. But at the last moment, she was rescued by Perseus, who slayed the monster.
I must have missed that trip to the planetarium.
When Cassiopeia was transported to the sky and immortalized as a constellation, it is said that the resentful sea nymphs who were so incensed prevailed upon Jupiter to make her a circumpolar constellation, which means that she would never sink into the waters of the ocean and would be compelled at times to occupy the undignified position of hanging upside down.
Maybe that was the summer I was at camp.
Henry, how do you know so much about Cassiopeia?
It's a story I've learned well over the past few years.
The next day, I'm at Check's Cafe, nursing my hangover. I bump into this woman who's on her way to work. I do mean bump into. She went down hard. It was totally her fault. I let her have it. She made me spill my Bloody Mary. It's too bad, too. We had a connection there. I could feel it. Turns out, she's a teacher at my old school. Man, was she pissed. Once my head cleared, I realized what a jerk I must have seemed like. I needed to make it right.
Good morning, Mr. Nutt.
Listen, Alice, about...
Shh.
Excuse me, Father. Do you have a minute?
Certainly.
I want to go in here to the church. It's been 15 years since I've been here. I've sinned a lot.
And I think if you walk through that door, lightning would strike you.
A reading from the book of Matthew. You cannot serve two masters, God and money, for you will hate one and love the other, or else the other way around. So my counsel is, don't worry about things, food, drink, and clothes. Will all your worries add a single moment to your life?
Lord Jesus Christ, you said to your apostles, I leave you peace, my peace I give you. Look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and grant us the peace and unity of your kingdom where you live forever and ever. And let us offer each other a sign of peace.
Hi again.
Hello, Mr. Knopf. Did you enjoy the children's mass this morning?
It's changed since I've been here. You know, I like the part where we offer each other the sign of peace. Peace.
Peace. I didn't know you went to school here.
Through 6th grade.
I couldn't believe it. I actually got something right that day. Trying to make peace with Alice helped me find peace with myself. Talking to her, it was easy to think I might belong here. Like this could be a new beginning. Before I knew it, I was making plans to help out at the school. I wanted to be part of something good, something real. My flight back to California was the next day. But I already knew I wouldn't be on that plane. What was next for me, honestly? I didn't know where I was going. But for once, I knew where I was. I was home. I wasn't planning to stay forever, but Germantown was becoming a part of me again. And at least for a while, I was becoming a part of it. When I was growing up here, I never really thought this place was much to look at. But maybe this was the first time I'd really looked. I wanted these photos to tell a story. I bet Cassie would like them.